Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Paul D'Ambrosio, and I teach Chinese philosophy at East China Normal University, where the四海为学collaborative learning project is based. I want to welcome you to our first roundtable of the 四海为学collaborative learning project for the 2024-2025 academic year. Today, we are hosting Professor Jin Li from Brown University, Professor Geir Sigurðsson from the University of Iceland, Professor Kristján Kristjánsson from the University of Birmingham, and Professor Ruyu Hung from Chiayi University. The topic of this roundtable is reflecting on learning and education. And I think in many ways, this is perhaps a really crucial or really fundamental issue. There's probably a lot of problems that we face in the world today, whether they're sort of personal, political, or social, where we're implementing, I think, better understanding of learning and education could help, or perhaps help in the future to lessen some of the tensions or to resolve some of the problems that we face. So we're very honored to host this roundtable tonight. We think education and learning are always timely topics, and so that includes this time. We have Shen Wenxuan from the University of Tennessee to serve as our chair. It has become a tradition here at 四海为学 to give younger scholars a chance to be part of high-profile academic events by inviting them to take part as chairs or discussants. So if there are any young scholars in the audience who wish to be part of our events, please email me. This event tonight will be 2.5 hours in total, ending promptly at 9:30 Beijing time. The basic structure is that each speaker speaks for a little bit and then has a conversation with each of the other speakers, and then we go to the next speaker in the same sort of structure, and so on. Before getting things started and handing them over to Shen Wenxuan, I want to say a few things about the 四海为学Collaborative Learning Academic Forum. The 四海为学Collaborative Learning Project hopes to distinguish itself from some of the less productive conventional practices in contemporary academia. As posted on our website, we are not interested in male peacocks, in jerks, or in any form of egoism or self-promotion. We hope to curb all types of aggressive and "look at me, I'm smarter than you," or "don't I know so much," and similar attitudes sometimes found in academic exchanges. We might even go so far as to say that we hope to be a counterbalance for the negative attitudes sometimes found in blind reviews. While there is a time and a place for anonymity, or at least the appearance of anonymity, communication in academia, there should be just as much time and place for speaking to one another in more congenial and community-forming settings. The neologism 四海为学 was actually created by Robin Wong, and it's a play on 四海为家, and we like to keep this idea in the foreground. So, the 四海为学Collaborative Learning Project then seeks to accomplish these shifts in orientation during academic exchanges by encouraging productive communication, humble discussions, real questions, and responses that are open and honest. We hope to foster environments where people truly learn from and with one another. So before introducing our chair, I want to once again thank Professors Jin Li, Geir Sigurðsson, Christiansen, and Ruyu Hung for taking time and for giving us presentations and discussion. Our chair is Shen Wenxuan, who is currently a third-year PhD student in philosophy in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Shen is interested in Confucian ethics, global justice, philosophy of science, and philosophical pedagogy. He is also working on Confucian theories of parental virtue and pedagogical virtues. Shen is also interested in evaluating cross-cultural psychological studies that seek Chinese philosophy as a background assumption via a feminist approach. Shen is also pursuing a graduate certificate in global studies and plans to write a paper on accounts of global injustices that draw support from sociological theories. We are very happy to have you here, Shen. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. It's my honor to moderate this roundtable reflecting on learning and education. So let's start it. Our first speaker is Professor Jin Li, and I will introduce her first and then give her time to talk. All right. Professor Jin Li is a professor of education and human development at Brown University. She earned her doctoral degree in human development and psychology from Harvard Graduate School of Education. Professor Li's research focuses on Eastern Asian virtue-oriented and Western mind-oriented learning models and how those models shape children's learning beliefs and achievements. Her 2012 book, Cultural Foundations of Learning, East and West, synthesizes related research over the past decades and offers new perspectives on the indispensable role of culture in human learning. She was one of 6 inaugural fellows selected by the Bergeron Philosophy and Culture Center 2015 to 2016, and at the Center for Advanced Studies in Behavioral Sciences, Stanford University, and at the Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University, China, 2016 to 2017. So now let's welcome Professor Li to give her talk. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wenxuan. Thank you very much, Paul, for this wonderful forum. I really feel honored very much. So because you said that we could show some slides, and maybe I'll just frame my work that way. But first, I would just want to make clear that my training is in psychology, particularly developmental psychology. So I look at philosophy as a way to make sense of the kind of data people in psychology collect and trying to make sense of why we see these patterns. I think philosophy has given me incredible insight from both Western, so-called Western, European origin, United States included, of course, and East Asian, yes, mostly Chinese, but also a little bit Buddhism, as well as thought, Japanese thought and Korean practices and thought and so on. So just a little bit of the East Asian background. Sorry. So I'll begin. Just want to show a sort of a passage that I read by Francis Bacon. Sorry, apologies. That he wrote in 1605. By the way, this was the only book he wrote in English. Everything else was in Latin. So I was happy to be able to read this. So he said this: God has framed the mind of man as a mirror or glass, capable of the image of the universal world, and joyful to receive the impression thereof, as the eye joyeth to receive light, and not only delighted in beholding the variety of things and vicissitude of times, but raised also to find out and discern the ordinances and decrees, which throughout all those changes are infallibly observed. I emphasize infallibly observed, for that nothing parcel of the world is denied to man's inquiry and invention. For all knowledge and wonder, which is the seed of knowledge, is an impression of pleasure itself. Let man endeavor an endless progress or proficiency in both God's word and God's work. Only let man beware that they apply both to charity and not to swelling, to use and not to ostentation. So This is a very interesting passage. So in this passage, Bacon basically, to my eye, expressed the 6 essential themes about learning. That is, the external world is the object of learning. Inquiry is an enterprise on which human beings are destined to embark. The purpose is to produce objective knowledge about the world. And the human mind is supreme in carrying out this inquiry. The scientific discovery requires active engagement of the learner. And one derives intrinsic enjoyment and pleasure by participating in this process. The knowledge as produced by such learning must be put to ethical use. So that's just my understanding of this passage. Here, I just want to share a story, but written by a Confucian writer in a much earlier period of history, Liu Xiang. So he says this: the king of Jin, Pinggong, asked his blind musician, Shi Kuang, I'm already 70. I like to learn, but I'm afraid it's too late. Shi Kuang replied, why not light a candle? And Pinggong was offended. How could a subject ridicule his king? Shi Kuang responded, how dare I, a blind subject? I have only heard that love for learning in young age is like the light from a rising sun. Love for learning in adult prime age is like the bright sunlight at noon. And love for learning in old age is like the light from candle. Lighting the candle or groping in darkness, which way is better? Pinggong brightened. How marvelous. So again, from this passage, I discern 6 essential learning themes. The first one is the self, but not the external world, is the object of learning. A person without the desire to learn is one without aim and power. Not even the king can be exempt. The pursuit of learning enables and dignifies powerless individuals to the degree that they are legitimized to challenge the otherwise powerful. Learning is a lifelong process. Love for and commitment to learning are sine qua non for lifelong learning. And finally, the purpose of learning is not to produce objective knowledge, but to cultivate and perfect self socially and morally. All right, so here I will just quickly point out that the kind of, the field I'm in, and we have done this kind of work, research. So researchers collect the words that people use to describe learning concepts. They collect the model learner images people hold in their minds, and descriptions of the self as learner, endorsement of learning statements, responses to experimental manipulations, thoughts and feelings from face-to-face interviews, and more, children's stories about learning, and recorded parent-child conversations about learning, and see how parents talk to them about learning, videotaped parent-teaching child sessions, and home observations of parent-child interactions, the students' images of good teachers, classroom teaching and teacher beliefs, and so on. So there's more, right? So at this point, I just like to talk, without the slides because we don't have a lot of time. So let me X out this, okay? So I can minimize that. All right, so you get a sense that I use sort of a philosophy, but not, I could have coded Confucius, Mencius, and Xunzi, especially Xunzi, about learning virtues. So as Wenxuan introduced, I focus basically based on decades of research, not just my own research, but others, many, many, many others. Okay, studying education and learning in Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and China, and also the East Asian diaspora in the West. Okay, so lots, decades of research basically produced pretty consistent patterns about differences in learning between these two sets of cultures. So the East Asian style can be said it's virtue oriented. This is what I use, this term, okay? And people can question and debate that. But the Western, so-called originating from Greek antiquity and Greek philosophy through continental European philosophy and the Middle Ages of theological thinking, all the way through modern science, Enlightenment, right? And Romanticism and existentialism, all the way to the current modern and postmodern philosophy. So I use the term mind-oriented learning because the Western style focuses on developing children's mind and use the mind to understand the world. Of course, to also improve yourself and to achieve as much as you can, to be the best as you can. And so maybe here I want to show you one more thing in this slide. Let me go down to, yeah, here. So this is in the book that Wenxuan mentioned. I did outline. All right. So 5 core emphasis in each learning model. So the so-called Western mind orientation has the following 5 sort of a core emphasis. One is, as I said, understand the world. Second is seeking certainty of knowledge. And now seeking certainty of knowledge, people can, of course, challenge, wait a minute, you know, how can you say that? Because in philosophy, we really, very few people are talking about certainty of knowledge anymore. Used to be, you know, used to be a high sort of a aspiration in traditional Western philosophy, right? So, but not anymore because a lot of doubt is cast on the human ability to actually get anything. So truth, you know, absolute truth, but it's a relative truth, relative certainty. But still, if you look at, sorry?
Can I, because I can't see the slides. Are we supposed to be seeing the slides?
Yes. Oh, very sorry about that. Yeah, you're supposed to. Oh, I have to, I don't know how to share. I'm glad people heard.
I think you just share screen.
I share screen? Okay, let's see. How do I do that? I'm on the screen, but I see. So I have to do this. Oh, thank you so much, Wenxuan, for your I previously actually also showed slides, but I think people heard these points. Okay, here, can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that help. I'm trying to. Okay, here we go. So a little slow on my. There we go. Okay, it's the Western mind-oriented sort of learning model. First, we already talked about understand the world, of course, if you think about science and even social science and so on. So seek certainty, right? Seek certainty of knowledge, which is traditionally very strong, like Pythagoras, for example, you know, first discovered mathematics and really built that and sort of built Greek philosophers started with deductive logic, deductive reasoning, right? So if you accept the premises, then you follow each step of the way, and then you have to accept the conclusion, and the conclusion is true. Okay, so anyway, so you can see the Aristotelian logic is aiming at that. Okay, and still today I would say science to a large extent we're still doing that. Of course we have to, because how else can we determine this is the cause of this illness, right? That's certainty, knowledge, and so on. Of course, you refine, you may be wrong, but new research shows that no, there's some other cause linked to that. But still, this whole idea of we're going to find out what the cause is, how we're going to cure this, cancer and so on. So that's still there, very powerful. I would say without that belief, core emphasis, Western science or science without any modifier cannot continue. So the third one is develop a used mind. I already mentioned develop in children beginning. And first of all, mind is believed to exist in everybody. And then it's a matter of how we develop that through family socialization, through schooling, and society at large. We want to hone children's mind so they can engage in analysis, understanding, critiquing, and improving. And number 4 is inquire by curiosity and interest. It is ever since the so-called progressive education, right? So the idea of protecting children's innate spontaneity and their curiosity interest is incredibly important. And by the way, I think there has been a lot of criticism of Asian learning and contemporary Asian learning and maybe traditional as well, but I'm not sure about traditional. When you think about Confucius and students, I don't see anything there oppressive. I, in fact, think Confucius encourages the students' interest and curiosity. And go ahead, ask your question, and I'm going to pose a question back to you, and then you ponder more. You come back with more questions, that kind of style. Okay, but in modern, like across East Asia, it's exam-based, and many people have criticized East Asian style as a sort of not very protective of children's curiosity and encouraging, promoting their interest and to inquire. So, but Western model of learning strongly emphasizes that. That's obvious from preschool all the way to graduate training. Finally, expressing self. The Western learning model strongly emphasizes, I think I jump a little bit to Ruyu's analysis, a very impressive, wonderful analysis on this kind of distinction, right? So words, or you emphasize writing versus you verbalize, their speech. The speaking eloquence has been a through line throughout Western history. And you cannot be possibly a political leader without being able to have eloquence, speaking eloquence. Anyway, that's just the fact based on my review of research and philosophy, studying some philosophy. Now, here is a Confucian virtue-oriented learning. The first one is perfect self, morally, mostly, morally, virtually, and socially, obviously, okay? The second one, I would say, is take the world upon self. That is emphasizing the learner. You don't learn just for yourself. You learn to contribute back to society, ideally. I'm not saying every child is like them. So by design, philosophically, Confucius, Mencius, particularly, just Xunzi, yeah, they all talk about this. And then there's a whole path of, 修身齐家治国平天下, whatever, okay, 格物致知, 诚信正义. So that whole thing is about taking the world upon yourself. The ultimate sort of a measure of your learning is your full engagement with the world beyond yourself, your family, and of course, at least in the community, and then higher level and across the world. The final thing is to bring peace to the world, right? 平天下. Anyway, and the third one is acquire and embody learning virtues. Instead of emphasize the mind, I would say the Confucian learning model very much emphasizes learning virtues. What are they? I can give you some examples. For example, commitment, sincerity, wholeheartedness, right? The commitment, resolve, diligence, endurance of hardship, perseverance, concentration, and humility, and a respect for teachers. I would say these are the core learning virtues. And pretty much the research data we collected from across the world, and particularly in East Asia, show this tendency. So then learn by humility and respect is particularly because this is not just self alone, but geared toward teacher. So learning, education, of course, involves teachers. And the kind of attitude the child has toward the teacher, the relationship you build with the teacher is essential. And that relationship, the key relationship, the core of that relationship rests on the idea of respect with teacher, 尊师重道, okay, and so on. So now it's quite opposite. Traditionally, Western learning model emphasizes verbal eloquence, self-expression. East Asian and Confucian learning models emphasizes less so, because in the whole analyze, Confucius expressed doubt. And throughout sort of Eastern history, right, East Asian history, there's a deep distrust to in speaking as a means to achieve worthy ends, because people can always talk more than they can do. And also Confucius is very suspicious of the glib tongue, okay? 佞人, he calls, okay? 佞, so 巧言令色, okay? So somebody who talks a beautiful language but doesn't do it, in fact, very deceptive. That's not great. And also very flattering speech is also a problem because it lacks sincerity. And boastful speech lacks humility, because you're just boasting yourself, okay? So yeah, in Asia, when there's people find themselves in need of speaking, they err, research shows, not just my claim, research shows that they err on the side of not speaking, or first listen a lot, and then trying to understand what's going on, then speak very much sensitively toward the context, the relationship. Anyway, so maybe I have used 10 minutes. Wenxuan, have I used 10 minutes?
Yeah, it's more than 10 minutes.
Okay, great. I figure I'm gonna stop here. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay,
I'm
thank
gonna
you.
not
Thank you,
share anymore. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So give others a chance to respond to this. Yes.
Yeah. So first, let's Professor Sigurðsson provide his response. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jin Li, and I would have liked to listen to you more, actually. It was very interesting what you were talking about. I'm not going to speak for a long time. I'll just have a couple of questions on what you were presenting. And so, I mean, one of the things that I'm interested in is to what extent we actually see these philosophies, the Confucian philosophy, or for that matter, Aristotelian philosophy, to what extent we see these philosophies reflected in the actual systems of education that we are dealing with today. And I wonder, in particular with regard to Confucian philosophy of education, to what extent do we see that the values or the ideas, the theories, the proposals, the Confucian proposals in the systems, to what extent are they really at work there? Well, probably you can help me a little bit with that, because I don't know the system so well in East Asia, be it the mainland China or Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Korea even, and Japan. But one thing that I noticed that you talk about, but you didn't include in the core emphasis was the Haoxue, or the Le, the joy of learning. And you say in your slides, that love for and commitment to learning are sine qua non for lifelong learning. Like you have to want to learn. And I think this is actually, it's something that is not discussed very often when we talk about the Confucian philosophy, even though actually it's mentioned in the very first analect. It's really the first thing that Confucius is purported to have talked about, the importance of Le, the importance of Haoxue, because otherwise nothing is going to happen. And I would like maybe to ask you, so first of all, the other question, how much do you think this Confucian model is really reflected in the systems today? And the second one is, I mean, shouldn't this be a core issue as well, to make education, to make learning something that people want to do by their own will, own desire? And how can we actually do that? Shouldn't we do more to somehow stimulate that sort of way of thinking? So maybe these first two could be a beginning of our conversation.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. These are great. So you're right, Geir. There has been a lot of discussion, a lot of academic research on this very first question. In fact, my interest was piqued first by reading Harold Stevenson Stigler's very large research that they conducted in the 1980s in three cultures: United States, Japan, and Taiwan, and later on China. And what they found was in the United States, public school particularly, there is emphasis on ability. So to do well in school, you have to be smart. And that ability basically is innate, intelligence testing type of thing. So you're born with a high level of ability, and then parents and teachers, school, and children themselves believe that's how you do great. You're excellent. You're brainy, okay? Whereas what they found in these three cultures, and in Japan, Taiwan, and the mainland China later on, is they believe in effort. So it's the differences are so large because they observed classroom teaching, they talked to children and interviewed parents, and this is consistent finding. They, of course, condensed that into ability versus effort, and they wrote books and tons of articles. I was very intrigued by the findings. And so that's why I looked at this in greater depth. And then, of course, the learning virtues is not just effort. There are so many, and each one is geared toward addressing a particular learning problem that we all encounter. And so on. In the current, yes, in that book that Wenxuan mentioned, okay, 2012, it's called The Cultural Foundations Learning Coding East and West. Okay, in that book, I actually devoted the entire chapter on feeling, emotions, and enjoyment and excitement and so on. I analyzed the first beginning sentences of the analects and what that means and so on. I agree with you, Geir. I didn't get a chance to talk about, but that's extremely important. Now, getting back to the current issue, I think it's undeniable that if you just take a look at not just China, but Japan, Taiwan, and Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore, you look at the actual education practice, I would say there is still very much of the Confucian model, okay? For example, the idea of virtues are there, and children, we have data, I actually in this slide, but I don't have time to show you. We recorded mother-child conversations about children's good learning attitudes and behavior versus poor learning attitudes and behavior. Especially take a look at the poor, because the poor, if children is not doing well, the parents are worried and they want to address that. Then we want to hear how they address the children's problems. And then you can see in the Taiwanese mother-child conversations, parents focus mostly on the learning virtues. You're lacking that. You're not making an effort. You're not paying attention to class. You're not practicing, and so on. Whereas Western European American parents focus on children's sort of a greatness, their self-worth, and hey, you really are excellent at reading. Why don't you read more? Based that way. That going from that perspective, well, I think you're a very smart kid, and you really you read before, and then let's see what we can do to find a time that can read together. So they try to motivate them based on the fact that the child is very bright and they're capable of learning. Whereas, for example, Taiwanese parents don't almost never mention the idea of capability or ability, but just learning is something that's very important, and you need to do it. And mom's here to help you, but you need to have learning virtues. So, but in this education, exam-based education, it's very difficult to sort of go back to Confucius, learning should be pleasurable, should be enjoyable, like, 不亦乐乎, 不亦乐乎, and so on. And the children should, just generate their curiosity as well, but not the same kind, okay? But still, children's own interests should be respected, and their questions particularly should be encouraged, and, should not be just sitting there listening to teachers. Unfortunately, the exam-based education, that's a little difficult, right? Of course, and people always ask, how come East Asia uniformly have a exam-based education system? This is not China, regardless of political system. All the East Asian cultures beyond, I would say, Southeastern culture, and I think in India, the same thing, okay? Pakistan. So it's not just East Asian, but Asia tends to have that, okay? And, many people have written about it. The bottom line is, because Asian societies, East Asian society, Confucian heritage, they very much emphasize relationships. They very much emphasize the family relationship, friendship, and so on. So what I call in this new book, I have this, is the personalization. They personalize everything, okay? So even in the court, they try to make connections with the judge and where they are not supposed to, okay? So sometimes they use bribery and so on. So that makes selecting.
We are a bit over time, so
okay. Well, I will finish. Okay, selecting the objectively selecting better students a problem, making that a really challenging. Okay, so how do you cut the? So they all go back to the impartial exam score. It's a really a big ethical dilemma. In this book, I pointed out as well. Thank you, Wenxuan. I'll stop there. Okay, thank you.
Now, please let Professor Kristjánsson provide some comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jin Li. It was very interesting. Just like Geir, I think I'll just go straight to a couple of questions I've got. So I've got one sort of empirical question and one philosophical question. So the empirical question is about biculturals. So when I was listening to you, I immediately thought of the novels by Amy Tan, The Kitchen, God's Wife, and the Joy Luck Club, where she describes, the experiences of Chinese immigrant women in the States and the difficulty they have in negotiating this sort of double identity. So the empirical question I want to ask you is, have you done any research into like East Asian immigrants in the US and how they manage successfully or not to be sort of to follow this interdependent, virtue-based self-conception at home, and then the Western independent mind-based at school? So can it be done successfully, or is there always going to be a conflict? Well, that's the empirical question. The philosophical question is that I would find it slightly difficult to sort of categorize all Western thinkers as falling into the pure mind category, because if you take somebody like Aristotle, Aristotle says that at least in early childhood and sort of elementary school level, virtue education in moral and civic virtues is most important, and it lays the foundation for everything else. And he says that actually phronesis development and the development of the mind and the intellectual virtues doesn't start until, adolescence or early adulthood. So it seems to me that somebody like Aristotle would fall into the virtue category regarding, children and young teenagers, but then later on move maybe to the intellectual one once you reach adulthood. So maybe it's not so clear cut actually that you can put every thinker into one of these categories.
Very nice, Christian.
Professor Li, so because we are a bit over time, can you control your time? Response time? Yeah, in short. Yeah.
Excellent. The first question about immigrant people. Oh yeah, there's a lot of research on that, and we have a very large data, longitudinal data, 3 years following children from 4 to 6, and observing the mother, child conversations and so on. So we have that. So we have done some analysis, and you're right. So the immigrant children, they're in the middle. But I would say what gets changed more is families adapt to, say, we only studied the European American, here in the United States, but I also read research in other Western cultures like Britain and Germany and so on. So it's similar. So what seemed to remain is the learning virtues. Parents coming from East Asia, they very much emphasize learning virtues, but also in the family, the idea of filial piety very much emphasized. Children, on the other hand, absorb the European, American, or Western style more. Of course, they have to learn math and science, they're in the classroom, they're in the system. So they combine, but the learning virtue, however, a number of students actually completely become distant from their family. So they seek independence and they reject the Asian model, the Confucian model. Yes, they struggle a lot more, but those who are highly achieving have a better combination of both. I would say, if you ask me what is kept from East Asia, is the learning virtues, yes, and the parental message about family responsibility. So that's an answer, yes. And then the other one is about Aristotle, virtue ethics. Yes, I'm fully aware of that. I agree. And in fact, the virtue ethics in philosophy is having a big comeback, okay? Not just the analytical. True, I agree. But the thing is, in terms of his historical practice, throughout the West, particularly contemporary, I'm in the Department of Education, so a lot of education practice or whatever is being discussed. So in the current, at least the United States classrooms, you don't see a lot of virtue emphasis, okay? A lot of is just the teaching children, analytical and so on. But I think the virtue ethics mostly probably at home. I think I don't doubt that is being taught. Children are being taught, have, kindness and help the community and through Christianity, Christian teaching, but also non-Christian teaching, children at home. I agree with Kristján, and that's important. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The last comment will be from Professor Hung.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I have three maybe comments and not really questions to raise. The first point is the conclusion in your PowerPoint, the slides, mentioning that Western parenting emphasizes cultivating children's self-worth, while Taiwan focuses on self-improvement. But regarding the latter, my limited personal experience suggests that students in recent years increasingly value individuality and subjectivity. Could this be related to Taiwan's recent declining birth rates and the increasing westernization of society? I'm not sure whether the parenting education trends in societies such as mainland China, Hong Kong, and Singapore are similar to those in Taiwan. And the second point is the Confucian emphasis on virtue mentioned in this presentation, which resonates with my own views. Although I do not conduct empirical research, my work lies between cultural studies and comparative educational philosophy. From my observations of cultural phenomena and literature review, I share a similar perspective. I propose that word obsession or word holism, as opposed to Western phonocentrism, is a distinct learning tendency. While Confucian culture emphasizes doing more than speaking and relies on visual perception, but it may lead, that's my concern, maybe later I will present it, it will lead to excessive concreteness and the risk of formalism. That's my concern. And the third point is whether your observation can be applied to other Confucian societies that do not speak Chinese, such as Vietnam and Korea, which are also deeply influenced by Confucian culture. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's great. Those are very good good questions. Yeah, your research is fabulous. It's very interesting. Yes, the observation about Taiwan. Of course, you're from Taiwan. I'm sure you know the contemporary situation there. So our data were collected some time ago, mother-child conversations about learning. So we analyze very detailed line by line discourse. Okay, so it's not just like any survey and large, but rather, hey, this is what the child says. This is what the mother says. Okay, and then about a poor learning situation. How does the mother or father go about talking to the child about that? So in my book, 2012 book, I gave quite a few examples of that data set. So yeah, I agree. I also have heard, but I have not seen a lot of research, right? I read some research, recent research. For example, in Taiwan, more recent research, like 2021, 22 published. Okay, so on the idea of filial piety, what does the filial piety do to children's learning beliefs? Okay, so the research by Fu Bizhen and Wang Xiuhuai from the Taiwan National University of Taiwan. Okay, so they actually discovered that children become more effort-based to improve, and because they want to honor their parents in terms of filial piety. So there's still this traditional value still there, but as you said, things are changing. So perhaps in Taiwan or Hong Kong, places like that, children become more westernized, observe more. There's actual research on Hong Kong Chinese. For example, in mainland China, adolescents are said to be irresponsible. They have this stereotypical view of adolescents to be risk-taking and so on. So more the culture believes in that, the more children behave that way. So Yang Qu's Angel, for example, his research recently on Hong Kong adolescents and Chongqing and the Chongqing adolescents much more traditional than Hong Kong. The Hong Kong adolescents believe in more irresponsible behavior, and therefore they actually do. Okay, and then they cut school and they truant and so on. Yeah, so there's that. And you're right. I think Hong Kong, in that sense, may be a little bit similar to Taiwan. I don't know to what extent Taiwanese adolescents believe in risk-taking, drug, and stuff like that. But there's at least this comparison. Okay, so these societies are different, and Japan, Korea, even more different contemporary societies. But I think in general, there is still family still strongly trying to impart this kind of traditional virtue-based learning, even in Taiwan. So I think your second question is about virtue. You just commented, right? It's I think it's the virtue part. I already mentioned a little bit. I'm just going to that the final thing about speech versus you're analyzing the words, the writing system. But I think it corresponds to the kind of observation I made for about Western societies very much emphasize self-expression and culminating sort of peaking to you can lead leaders, okay? And they're really, even in Taiwan, political debate in a democratic system is not nearly as heavily emphasized as, say, in the West, okay? But it's what the leaders do, how they conduct themselves, how they deliver policies and so on. But so I can't comment on your philosophical grounding of formalism and so on. But I think it's a very interesting distinction in terms of how across East Asia, I could not identify a single eloquent political leader that stands next to, say, Lincoln, okay, Martin Luther King, or Obama. I could not identify. None of the political, I'm not talking about China, I'm talking about in the democratic systems like Japan and Korea and Taiwan. I have not seen a single leader that can measure up. And in fact, I have this great example of Ban Ki-moon, the UN secretary. the reason he was beloved was because he showed humility. He stutters a little bit. We should. In fact, that style was beloved by the third world leaders, so-called. Okay, so it's very fascinating to me that leaders can have a different way of showing themselves in terms of speaking. I will stop there.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Li, for your talk and other three professors' comments. So our next talk will be by Professor Geir Sigurðsson. Professor Sigurðsson studied philosophy, sociology, and Chinese studies in Iceland, Germany, Ireland, United States, and China. He defended his PhD in philosophy at University of Hawaii at Manoa in 2004, and is currently Professor of Chinese Studies and Intellectual Philosophy at the University of Iceland. He is the author of Confucian Priority, Ritual Learning of Philosophical Interpretation, an annotated translation of the ancient Chinese classic Sun Tzu's Art of War into his native Icelandic. Over 50 journal articles and book chapters, and also co-editor of 3 forthcoming volumes on Chinese philosophy and intellectual history. He presently works on the monograph on Chinese philosophical view of aging and has just released his first work of fiction. So just a kind of reminder that we only have 90 minutes left, so I probably will interrupt more so in next talks and responses. So now welcome Professor Sigurðsson for his talk.
Okay, thanks a lot. I was trying to share my screen here. Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, everything froze basically earlier. Okay, I'm going to try to speak very briefly. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to solve our problems, our educational problems in our system. So let me just close the window here during this talk, and time seems to fly quicker for some reason right now. So I will just speak briefly and let me see. Okay. So actually, the idea of this conversation that we're having now came about, I think, 1 year ago when there was a discussion on 2 books on political systems, or by Bai Tongdong and Daniel Bell. They both wrote books on the sort of the China model, where they were suggesting that, politically speaking, China may have something to offer to the world in terms of political systems. And they were sort of introducing their books. I mean, they're both wonderful books, and they're, of course, amazing thinkers. And we started having this little discussion about education, because I was a little bit surprised that they didn't address the issue of education. A little bit, I think, as we sometimes tend to take for granted that we just have to adjust our political system somehow, and then everything will be in order. As if we don't have to think about things from the ground up, and think about things holistically and in a kind of a future-oriented way. What are we doing with the new generations that are constantly being produced, of course, and form a part of our society? Where are they going? What are they going to be like? What sort of a future do we see? And why do we not see more discussion about that? And I don't really, even in my own society, which is supposed to be a very progressive society, I don't really see that. So my concern is basically that there is very little focus on reforming our approaches to education and thinking about the future, not trying to put out fires now. Can we do something, a kind of a preventive or kind of a preemptive way of thinking for the future, where we really have a kind of a greater sort of plan, long-term plan for the future in terms of what sort of a society do we want to see in 40 years or 30 years? And that, of course, has to begin with how we think about the future generations who are going to inherit our society. And the idea of education, at least it seems to me, within the political realm, is very narrow. It's preparation and training for jobs. It's kind of individualistic. How can we make these people contribute to the GDP growth and make them skillful in the sense that they have the sufficient knowledge to take on particular jobs and in this case be citizens that we can profit from. So very little actually focus on other aspects of being human in a society. It's really only about, I mean, I'm not saying only, of course, there are also discussions about that. And I know that people in the educational sector, of course, they think about these things, but we have very little kind of policy discussion about that. And then what also surprises me is that philosophers in general, and even those who are also focusing on Chinese philosophy, they tend to be have very limited interest in education, which I find surprising because, I mean, this, at least to me, this is what you do for the future. I mean, this is the most important thing for the future, not analyzing terms or the meaning of terms or whatever. It's really about how do we think about where we are going. And I've sometimes organized things that have to do with Confucian education here in Iceland. Nobody shows up. Nobody's interested, and even those who are supposed to be, very interested in Confucianism, they find, this is not very, very interesting at all. So it's a little bit frustrating. Of course, I am a Westerner sort of focusing on, in particular, Chinese philosophy and in particular, maybe Confucianism, although Taoism also features quite prominently in what I do. But of course, I do not believe that Confucianism can resolve all the problems that we are dealing with in our education system. Not at all. But I still believe that it has a lot to offer in terms of it can inspire us to think a little bit differently about what education means and where it should take us. I know that Aristotelian philosophy also has a lot, and of course Kristján, my fellow countryman, has done remarkable work precisely where he is focusing on the educational value, in particular on Aristotle. I think that's immensely valuable. But I think also Confucianism and other maybe philosophies also have a lot to contribute there. So I'm not thinking about this as a magic formula. Now, just a couple of things before I finish. This is the horse before the cart. I think the cart is very often put before the horse in our systems. And so what I like very much about Chinese way of thinking and philosophy is really this focus on doing things in the right order. We have to think about the ground up. We have to think about the roots of our society, the roots of that is supposed to grow out from there. If we don't attend to the roots, then everything will wither and die, basically. And this is something you have already in the Great Learning. Now, of course, this the second passage there from the Analects maybe not reflect that so much, but because I mean here Ruyu, one of Confucius' disciples, asked, when there's so many people, what can we do for them? Make them prosperous. And when they are prosperous, what can we do? We have to educate them. So it means that education doesn't come first, but perhaps it also reflects that the sentiment that we also have in the Mengzi, that it may not be realistic to expect that people will be focusing on education until they have at least a kind of a sound material well-being, So that maybe that's something that has to come first. And of course, that's important, but it doesn't mean that we have to be so incredibly rich before we can start thinking about education. Now, in the Confucian, the early Confucian corpus, I really feel that education is the sort of one thread, is really the iguan that goes through the entire thing. It's the foundation of what Confucianism is really about. And I just want to show you a couple of passages from the most important Confucian writings. I mean, this is the very first passage in the Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu is a big book, and it starts with this, that learning must never be halted. I mean, it's really about lifelong learning. It can never be halted, and we can never consider it to be halted either. We have to continue all the time. This is why I think Haoxue, the idea of the joy of learning, is so important, because it has not only to do with children, it has to do with us, it has to do with everyone, that we are keeping improving us throughout our lives, and it should be a kind of an ambition that we have. Blue dye is taken from the indigo plant, but it is bluer than the indigo. Ice is made from water, but it's colder than water. Everything can be improved constantly, including us. And of course, in the Analects, this is the passage that I mentioned to Jin Li. Isn't this a source of pleasure? This is the very first Analect as well, and I think that's very significant. And then from the Zhongyong, we come from somewhere. We come from nature. We get born, and then we have certain characteristics. Something similar, probably we have in Aristotle as well. And cultivating the way that is basically drawing out our natural dispositions, or cultivating our natural dispositions, that's education. That's what we are supposed to do. And here, of course, in the Zhongyong, the attempt is to make this into a kind of a very logical, naturalistic process. We get born, and then what we do is that we cultivate the way. This is normal. This is what we are supposed to do. So it's also a kind of a normative thing. And so I will just finish with this thing here. I think these three interrelated philosophical elements are, if I try to summarize the importance of what we can take from the Confucian philosophy, I think it's really the relationality which is at the core of it. And I think Christian also mentioned that when he was having a conversation with Jin Li. The relationality is very important, that we understand ourselves first and foremost as relational beings, not as isolated individuals. And we cannot become anything without other people. And we have to understand that deep in our hearts, in our soul, in our mind even, that our mind is not an isolated entity. It's something that can only develop and prosper and become something in combination and in society with other people. So I think that's a very important kind of sentiment that we need to breed in people, and try to undermine this excessive individualism that we have received, especially maybe from capitalism. Education is humanization, in the sense that we are trying to make ourselves more and more human. In that sense, I mean, that means, of course, we are human in the best sense of the word. That we are taking our most excellent characteristics and improving them, and that's, of course, a continuous process that we have to do all our lives. And then I like the idea of harmony as a continuous aspiration in social life, that we are constantly thinking about the situation we are in, and most of the situations we are in are social situations, and we are always trying to find the best way to deal with these situations, which means not necessarily that we make the most profit from it, but we try to resolve these situations in such a way that they will be, let's say, maximally profitable for everyone involved, or something like that. Yeah. So these are just my 5 cents, just a few kind of thoughts, on why I think Confucian philosophy has something to contribute to this discussion. And I really, I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to be with you here and talk about these sort of things. And I hope that something else can be taken from this conversation, that it will lead to maybe more collaboration. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your talk, Professor Sigurðsson. Now it's the time for the response and comments. So the first comment is from Professor Li. Professor Li, you are muted.
Okay, great. Geir, thank you very much for this very wonderful short. I know you have a lot more to say. You have written books and so on. Very interesting critique of your own native society, but also at large sort of Western world. So I'm particularly struck by the idea of excessive individualism. Of course, here in the States, we see that. But I like to just think about education. What you think is a sort of a manifestation in the realm of education, say in the school system, that you might call that excessive individualism? That's just the first my question. First question. The second question is, again, you propose relationality, harmony, and so on, okay, as a way to inter-philosophical elements. Okay, I like that very much. Okay, so getting back to the idea of relationality, I agree. You pointed on some very key issues for education the world over. Okay, because as Ruyu was mentioning, in Taiwan, children are becoming more and more individualistic. So the trend is moving toward the more individualism, but not the other way, right? Even in East Asia. And also people have commented on China and large cities like Shanghai and Beijing and Guangzhou and so on. Children are also, families or people are more sort of pushed toward individualism. Yes, there's that. Okay, like marriage decline and the decline of birth rates and so on and so forth. Okay, yeah. So getting back to the idea of relationality, again, in the educational realm, can you sketch out some kind of way that excessive individualism could be dampened from the relational effort? I just want to hear from you.
Yeah, well, I don't have a magic formula there, but my wife is a preschool teacher. And I think, in fact, in preschools, they do a lot of that. And but somehow it seems to me that as soon as they enter primary school, that sort of element seems to become less and less important. So it seems it's almost as if it's assumed. I don't think it's very conscious, perhaps, but it's almost as if it's assumed that during preschool they will be socialized, and then they will have been socialized by 6, and then the individualistic period can start because it's already been established. Sorry, I don't think this works this way. I think this is something that we have to be reminded of, throughout our lives, basically, that we are simply a part of society, and unless we really realize that we are social beings, maybe even in an Aristotelian way, we are not going to be able to realize our greatest potentialities. So I don't have, any kind of easy ways to facilitate this, but I think that there is not enough emphasis on this in not only our school system, but also in our societies and in our economies. So, yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's a comment from Professor Kristjánsson.
Yeah, thank you so much, Geir. It's very nice that we have 2 representatives from the small country Iceland in this symposium. So I've got 2 quick comments for you, and the second comment will lead on to a question. So the first comment is that I think you may be a little bit too pessimistic about the quality of educational discourse in politics and policy making. I mean, from my experience, yes, if you think about standard party politics in the West, obviously you don't hear much reasonable discussion about that. But if you enter, avenues where policymakers are speaking. I mean, civil servants from ministries of education across the world, like in UNESCO or OECD forums. I mean, I think the standard of discussion by these policymakers is often much higher actually than in standard education conferences. So I think we shouldn't underestimate sort of the quality of thinking that's in the ministries of education across the world. The second comment has to do with a lack of interest in education, in Confucian educational thought. I think a lot of it stems from this prejudice, especially by people who have never read any, Confucian texts, that Confucianism is very conservative. It's all about deference to authority. It's completely uncritical of tradition. It's just about, learning some rituals and replicating them. So the standard response I sometimes get is that, well, Aristotle was pretty bad. I mean, reactionary and bad, but Confucius was even worse. Now, I know you have spoken about, the Confucian respectful but critical approach to tradition. Respectful but critical. I mean, you could say that also about Aristotle, about Dewey, about many Western thinkers. So what would be unique about the Confucian educational approach towards tradition, and why is it not as conservative and reactionary as many people in the West think it is?
Yeah, these are good comments. I'm happy to hear that you are less pessimistic than I am. But of course, then, yeah, you have more experience of dealing perhaps with policymakers, especially, I mean, you've been dealing with UNESCO and OECD and other. So I'm happy to hear that. Maybe, and I'm sure actually that people within the schools, teachers themselves, they would probably join you in finding my assessment to be too pessimistic. That's possible, and I know that they're doing a wonderful job. But when I talk about education, I think I'm also talking about how we discuss things, what we would like to see in the future, and especially when you listen to politicians, it doesn't seem like there is much interest in changing these kind of views, and I always feel like we are supposed to become some kind of tools, for the GDP growth or something like that, instead of thinking about, what really makes us human and why society is important and so on. So I hope I am too pessimistic, and I hope you are right. Okay, yeah, the question you ask is very important. Actually, it's really, really important because it is true, and I was also thinking about this when Jin Li was giving her talk. When we think about what is Confucian in these education system, we might want to ask, which Confucianism are we talking about? Because there are sort of many Confucianisms, really. I mean, this is not my term. This is taken from Taiwanese philosopher Huang Junjie, who talks about different kind of Confucianisms. And one of them is, of course, the one that you mentioned. It's the authoritarian, quite not particularly attractive kind of Confucianism that was probably, we might say, dominant sort of towards the end of the Qing dynasty, and that was very reactionary and too conservative. We could even say in North Korea we have something like this sort of very authoritarian Confucianism, much rather than socialism. So of course, any kind of ideology can become its worst adversary in a way. Now, but to me, it's for any philosophy I'm dealing with, and it just so happens that I mostly deal with Confucianism. It really has to do with making it applicable and relevant to our times, and I think you are doing the same with Aristotle, normally speaking. So it's our task to interpret it and make it applicable and relevant and interesting. And I think precisely, I think the Confucian philosophy, or the early Confucian philosophy that we find in the early Confucian writings like the Analects, the monks, the great learning, Zhongyong, Sun Tzu. The attitude to tradition is very interesting, I think, and it's something that we could learn from. It has to do with using the tradition as a kind of a foothold that we have when we are growing up, something that enables meaning, enables a kind of a framework of meaning for us. But at the same time, the individuals have to be encouraged to be the carriers of that tradition. And the tradition is always moving. It's always going somewhere. And it's basically going somewhere through us. So we have to be both, like you said, respectful, but also critical of the tradition if there are elements within the tradition that are not really functional anymore, or they don't fit anymore. And I feel that, I would be tempted to speak about, the Confucian theory of tradition, because I think that's exactly what it is. That even in the Analects, Confucius expects his disciples to be, of course, maintain the tradition, but you can only maintain it by changing it, by adapting it constantly to the situation at hand.
Okay, thank you. The last comment is from Professor Hung.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting talk. And I also appreciate your view that learning and education involves cross-cultural and international collaboration. And also, I think the most important thing is how to ensure this important Confucian virtues vital in contemporary times and become significant elements in education. For me, as an educational philosopher, as well as a teacher educator, I have some issue. Okay, so how to make people understand the importance of the Confucian virtues in a modern society dominated, especially nowadays, by materialism, utilitarianism, and consumerism. I personally believe that modern individualism and human rights can be compatible with Confucian ethics, but in practice, sometimes the practice they lead to very different situations. So I will provide an example which concerns me much recently. I don't know if in universities in other countries, if you have this kind of policy or regulations in Taiwan, if students, they hope to take leave from class, sometimes they need to register maybe just online to specify the reasons that why they will be absent in a particular class. So normally, as long as students, specify the reason, it is always okay for the lecturer, for the teachers or professors. But those reasons are listed by the universities, or they are all the same. For example, sickness or bereavement. But just in very, very recent years, the university invent a very special reason, which is called mental health reason. So, students, they can specify if they just feel this psychological need, they just want to take leave. Well, I'm a little bit concerned about this. It seems to me this kind of reason, of this kind of regulation created by the university, actually, it ignores the space for teacher-student interaction. That's what I call, this may be what you call the relationality in education. And also it ignores teachers' professional judgment. And so maybe I would like to hear some views from, intercultural ideas. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, as for the sort of intercultural aspect, I think with regard to Confucianism, there is this, you probably know of the Boston Confucianism, the Robert Neville and John Bertrand. At the time, they presented Confucianism as a kind of a portable tradition, tradition that could be very easily somehow adapted to any kind of culture as a kind of a framework, and I think that's actually a very, very good idea. I think it can do that. And maybe we don't even have to call it Confucianism. We can take from Confucianism, certain ideas and approaches and values and try to make them applicable to our own situation. Now, the particular situation that you are talking about, I think this is probably more or less a global thing. I think it's of course it's something that I think actually increased after COVID. Also, this is how we feel, at least, and it's also, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to respond to this because I don't know what is the right way to deal with this sort of situation. But it definitely has to do, to some extent, with the consequence of the lack of resonance that we have in society. I think it has to do with more and more isolation that we have been probably going through during the COVID times, and it seems like people have a hard time readapting to a normal society where you actually meet face to face, and there is more resistance to that by people who maybe before they even if they tended to have kind of not so social tendencies, now they just completely give up. And I think it's also a lack of exposure. So in a way, I think this is a good example of a very dire consequence that we have from a society that puts less emphasis on the social aspect of social togetherness, so to speak, because it's a kind of a training, and I think in the Confucian context, togetherness and even caring for others is something that you need to train. It's not something that comes, just automatically. It's something that you can only cultivate and train. And what we have been going through during the COVID time, which was maybe necessary, is that unfortunately there are people who lost that ability to be with other people, and that's it's something that we have to work on. Maybe not by forcing them necessarily to do otherwise, but we have to work on this in some kind of way to rehabilitate them.
Okay, thank you for your talk. Our next speaker will be Professor Kristján Kristjánsson. Professor Kristjánsson is a professor of character education and virtue ethics, Jubilee Centers for Character and Virtues at the University of Birmingham, United Kingdom. His interests lie in research on character and virtues as the intersection between moral philosophy, moral psychology, and moral education. He has published various books on those issues. The latest one on Friendship for Virtue and Phronesis, Retrieving Practical Wisdom in Psychology, Philosophy, and Education. He is also the editor of the Journal of Moral Education. Okay, welcome, Professor Kristján.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this really interesting roundtable. So I guess I'm the odd person out in this company because I don't pretend to be an expert on Confucianism. I have read the Analects and I've read some of Mencius's work, but I don't sort of pretend to be an expert in those areas. So I'm very happy to learn from you. However, I am really interested in the contribution that Chinese philosophy could potentially make to educational thought, and in a way, I've been forced to take that stance by OECD. I've been working as a consultant for OECD for a few years now, and OECD is, as some of you may know, seriously thinking about dropping its human capital theory that Geir was referring to, the theory about GDP as the be all and end all of education, and adopting some kind of a flourishing paradigm instead. And interestingly, the pressure on OECD to change is coming from the countries that score highest in PISA comparisons every 2 years, countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, etc. So a lot of Asian countries are pressurizing OECD into adopting a flourishing paradigm. So I've been working with OECD policymakers on trying to come up with some kind of a consensual view on flourishing, because consensus is the key concept for all these United Nations institutions, and OECD has a veto policy. So any one country can, in principle, veto OECD policy, and this is why it changes so rarely. It's remained almost stable since the 1970s when the human capital theory was adopted. So it's complicated. So this is just giving you two recent reports there at the bottom, one written for UNESCO and the other for OECD, both focusing on this concept of flourishing or eudaimonia as a possible aim of education. And I wrote this book in 2020 about flourishing as aim of education, but that book is now already very much outdated. I would write a very different book today because the discourse on flourishing has moved on quite a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. And also this book was very Western oriented as well, and didn't really sort of think about flourishing in an Asian or a global South context. So where does this sudden interest in flourishing in the last 4 or 5 years spring from? Well, philosophers might say it comes from virtue ethics, from Aristotle, from MacIntyre, etc. People in education say, well, this is because character education is making a comeback, and character education is aimed at human flourishing. People in psychology will say, well, this is because of positive psychology, which started early this century, people like Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman. And then others will say, well, this is all owing to the mental health epidemic affecting young people. People are really worried about young people's well-being or flourishing, and think this needs to be a bigger topic in educational circles because of what's happening with mental health. So what I did in my 2020 book was I looked at 4 sort of standard Western accounts of flourishing. The Aristotelian, the liberal, the self-determination theory one, and the positive psychological one. So basically 2 from philosophy and 2 from psychology. And I just kind of talked about the pros and cons of these different accounts. I mean, I think they've all got certain advantages, but also certain weaknesses or shortcomings. So just if we take one example, the Aristotelian account, which I spend most time on in the book, it's really strong on the moral and rational and emotional aspects of human flourishing, but it doesn't talk much about individual purpose or meaning, how individual students sort of grasp the meaning of their studies. And it's very, very weak on any transcendent experiences like awe or elevation, because Aristotle was an extremely down-to-earth kind of guy and not interested in anything spiritual or otherworldly. And you can go through all these Western accounts and, give the pros and cons of them. And in the book, I tried to achieve some kind of a synthesis by taking the best from positive psychology and adding it to Aristotle, and also with some liberal elements as well about autonomy and authenticity. So it's a kind of a kitchen sink approach to flourishing in the book. But the OECD liked the book because, I mean, they liked the consensual aspect in it. I mean, trying to find some kind of a synthesis. But they said to me, well, this is great, but there is a big but. We are never going to be able to get this through the discussion in OECD conventions without an input from the Eastern philosophies as well. So they gave me the task of, can you try to sort of bring in insights from the Eastern philosophies and the global South philosophies? They specifically mentioned Buddhism, Confucianism, and the African Ubuntu philosophy. And what I did was, I mean, not pretending to be an expert in any of these, I organized a webinar, which is available on YouTube. There's a link there. where I asked one expert on each of these three philosophies to come and talk about what kind of contribution they could make to a discourse on educational flourishing, and Geir was the one who talked about Confucianism. I strongly recommend this YouTube video. And then I added that to my report for OECD, which OECD is still considering. It's a very slow-moving beast. It doesn't take decisions very quickly. So as far as I see, I mean, there are two big problems in the Western accounts. I mean, all these four, in a way, that I mentioned earlier, which I think possibly could be remedied with some further input from Confucianism and Ubuntu. I mean, one is obviously individualism. We talked a lot about that. Now, if you read Aristotle's Politics, you wonder, why do people say that? I mean, that seems to be a very collectivist treatise, but the problem is that most people who write about Aristotelian flourishing, they only rely on a Nicomachean ethics, and Nicomachean ethics has an individualist bias. And then there is a disenchantment. I mean, there is the failure in the Western accounts to sort of make any room, make any space for attraction to transcendent ideals. Of course, you see that in the Christian tradition, but like Thomism, Aquinas, but most of the educational flourishing accounts, they only draw on secular Western accounts, and in most of these accounts, maybe apart from Platonism, there is very little of the spiritual or the transcendent. So could Confucianism offer a reprieve? I mean, could it sort of counterbalance this individualism and this disenchantment? So again, I mean, not pretending to be an expert on Confucianism, I have sought advice from experts, and in his contribution to this webinar, Geir talked about, so as he did today, about Confucianism's focus on the realization of the relational notion of selfhood, understanding oneself as being largely constituted by one's immediate social environment. And so I've been trying to sort of combine this with the focus in Aristotle's Politics on friendship and relationality and collective practical wisdom, and the people at OECD, they like this. I mean, they think this will appeal to people outside the Western world a lot. And then the second problem about disenchantment, so this is again something which I've spoken to Confucian experts about, like Philip Ivanhoe and Owen Flanagan, and they particularly pointed me to passages in Mencius, where Mencius talks about the delight we take in virtues and in learning, where Mencius says that these virtues, they delight our hearts like meat delights our mouths. So maybe there is more sense in Confucianism of this transcendent, I mean, the Tao and the heaven and these sort of transcendent ideals than you can see in traditional secular Western thoughts. And I talked there about, especially about the emotion of Jing, which I can't pronounce well, but seems to underlie Li, propriety, in Confucian thought, and Jing seems to be sometimes translated as respect, sometimes as deference, sometimes as reverence, sometimes as admiration, sometimes as awe, but this is exactly the emotion that is completely missing from Aristotle's text, this being drawn to higher ideals through this sense of awe or admiration. So just to end, I'm not sure where this work on flourishing in educational circles is going to end. At least you can see more and more articles being written. When I wrote my 2020 book, I had to create opponents because there was nobody sort of writing against this view. But now there are 3 or 4 serious educational philosophers who are writing against this new flourishing agenda, and think it doesn't mean anything, and it's just diluting the conversation. So I can see 3 possible outcomes of this work that is being done at the moment. within the auspices of OECD and UNESCO. Maybe we can find some kind of a theoretical sweet spot which sort of synthesizes Eastern, Western, and Global South views. That is very optimistic, maybe too optimistic. Secondly, we could possibly end up with some kind of a consensual approach about main themes or main items where each different educational system could still make offer some caveats or make certain exceptions about things they would like to focus on, although it is not the international policy. And thirdly, and most pessimistically, while a process of synthesis could possibly succeed in excluding certain marginal conceptions or no-go areas, the remaining controversies could still outweigh the agreements and everyone would just continue to pursue their own agenda. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but at least there seems to be this incredible interest at the moment in educational circles around the world in trying to come up with some new universal ideal of the aims of education. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kristján. So now it's a comment from Professor Li. Professor Li, you are muted.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Kristján, a very interesting perspective, and I particularly I'm struck by your work for OECD, because that is a very organization that does very concrete work, like international assessment, and come up with a way to test children. You know, it's just really the nitty-gritty, right, of education. So I'm really glad that they have a philosopher and they consult you on, you know, these issues, and they like your book. I understand that. So I was just thinking about your very interesting proposals, you know, like we can bring in the non-Western way, but I think the idea of virtue, pursuing virtue, from Aristotelian virtues, and other like Confucian virtues. There are many more. I mentioned a few, but that's just learning, but many more others that Analects and all the classical and Neo-Confucian scholars and all the way through talk about, and a lot. It's a comprehensive about human life. Now, how do you, like in my new book, I began my new book, you know, by discussing, I was struck by the Shakespearean Hamlet kind of a question, to be or not to be. That is a question. And when I first heard that, it made no sense to me because the question was weird and without subject and to do what, where to be with who, doing what. Because that was coming from a relational background. This bare bone kind of a statement, it's very odd to me, very essentialist. And then I said, okay, maybe the Confucian way we can rephrase it to become or not to become a full human. That is the question for the Confucians. Okay, so it's all comprehensive about that. I like what you're saying about that. So the virtue, I agree. I mean, in the West right now, in a lot of philosophical discussions, and people talk about virtue being very important. So now, when you in a society, our education system is basically an institution. And as we all know, institutions are subject to legal regulations, all right? So lots of laws governing how we run a school, how we move children from grade 1 to whatever, okay? So when you think about Western sort of a rights-based, sort of the self, rights-based persons, each person is granted with lots of individual rights. So do you think that kind of a very strong Western rule based on rule of law governing education, every bit of the way, and more and more regulations as a witness in the United States, go into how you regulate the teacher behavior. For example, a teacher cannot even pat the child on the shoulder because you may be physically or sexually abusing the child. So a teacher, natural hug is prevented. So no body contact, okay? Stuff like that. I mean, in the Confucian, we would think that's kind of weird, okay? You are blocking natural human compassionate and care-oriented behavior by legal regulation, right? So I think, not just the ideas that we bring to the class, but also way more important, legal regulations that stop, that prevent any human heart, like Wenxuan said, okay, to actually try something different. I think that's very difficult. Maybe, as Geir said, in preschool, you can do it more easily because, the regulations are less strict. But when you move up to that, so very strict sort of ways you can interact with your student now. So I would like to comment particularly on your working with OECD and doing nitty-gritty work, how we might move beyond that. I mean, we can't, change laws easily in any culture, particularly in the Western democratic society, and that process is very complicated. So I just want, that's just my sort of a reaction to your work. I'd like you to help us think through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, these are very big questions. I think the best way for me to respond is just to cite some empirical work we've done with professionals, which sort of confirms your view in a way. So we do a lot of work with medical doctors and teachers and nurses and so on. And we have done big studies of people at different career stages. So we've interviewed and surveyed first-year students in teaching law, medicine, nursing, policing, etc. And then final-year students and then experienced professionals. And the first-year students, they usually rely a lot on their own moral compass and their own moral virtue. So when we give them some dilemmas from the classroom or from the medical surgery, we ask them, how would you solve this? They would rely on their virtues. After 3 or 4 years at university, this has completely changed. So they tend to cite all kinds of codes and rules and formal regulations. And this is because professional ethics has been deontological and rule-based for the last 50 years. And then when we interview finally the experienced professionals in the field, the experienced teachers or the medical doctors or nurses after 10, 20 years, then they say, well, we realize that these rules, they don't really sort of solve the issues. I mean, we always have to rely on our own sort of compass. And so there seems to be this U curve. I mean, it starts high, it goes down, and it goes up again. So I think the response to your question is that you are quite right, but this is just a historical, in a way, coincidence because of the overwhelming sort of focus on deontological, rule-based, code-based professional ethics. So the way to change the situation is to change the way professional ethics is being taught at university, especially to these professions, these people professions like medicine, nursing, and teaching.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
So the next comment is from Professor Sigurðsson.
Yeah, thanks, Kristján. I also really admire your work for the OECD, and I really hope that something will come out of it. I expect that something will come out of this, for sure. I was particularly, since we don't have that much time, I'm just going to be very quick, I was fascinated about that idea of re-enchantment that you were talking about. I think that's actually much more important than we may realize. I think there is some work being done in, I think the problem is being identified and maybe it's not formulated always in the same way. I'm particularly thinking about Hartmut Rosa when he talks about resonance, that we need to find resonance, right? That this is one of the problems in our society, that has become so disenchanted that people are just not, they feel that they are devoid of meaning and they are not really able to relate to other people. I mean, this is sort of revolves around things that we have been talking about here in today. In this regard, that when you were dealing with Owen, you were having communication with Owen Flanagan and Philip Ivanhoe, they apparently specifically mentioned Li, the idea of ritual, right? And I think in some ways ritual is coming back. It's enjoying some kind of a comeback, although in a very vague form, I suppose, And I would like to really point to the Confucian theory of Li, which I think is immensely valuable. Of course, Li is not only ritual; it's so much more. It's a way of communicating with society and finding your place within society, and also enables you to feel that you are a part of something bigger than yourself. So it can also induce a kind of a transcendent feeling, becoming a part of the community without having to, appeal to some kind of transcendent deities or something like that. This book here is something I've been reading with interest. This is Byung-Chul Han, who is Byung-Chul Han, sorry, despite the name, is actually German. And he's been writing short books about various issues. He's very interesting, although he's maybe not so, he doesn't go perhaps very deep into issues, but he's a kind of a critique of modern society. And this particular book is called the Disappearance of Rituals, and where he talks about, the problems that we don't have any rituals anymore, and which means that we have no frameworks of how to behave anymore. We don't know how to behave. Everything is so open-ended, everything is so individualistic that we have no guidelines, And one sentence from that book I found very interesting, and I think it really applies to the Confucian Li in particular, where he says that in our modern times we have communication without community, but with rituals we have community without communication. So what he means by communication is not verbal communication, but we have a community simply through our actions. And I think this is something that we could work on. We could make this more maybe conspicuous in our societies today, that it's important to have some kind of rituals. Of course, we do have rituals. It's just that we don't admit it. And then, of course, we have, unfortunately, we have in some societies where rituals are being taken over, especially by authoritarian leaders to boost nationalism and that sort of thing. But we need more positive rituals. And I hope that this work of yours, of the re-enchantment in one way or another, can be continued. So it's just a comment, it's not a question.
Yeah, thank you, Geir. Yeah, well, I was agreeably surprised when I started to talk to these practically minded thinkers about the emotional awe and being drawn to something larger than yourself. I mean, I thought this would be too philosophical for them and they would just sort of start to yawn, but actually they seem to resonate quite well, and not least with the people coming from Asia. And people in the West often have this prejudice that people in Asia are only interested in grades and so on, but actually when I speak about awe and elevation and transcendence, I mean, that seems to resonate with people coming from the Confucian background. And just to give, I mean, one example of what I'm talking about, I mean, just think about the way literature is being taught across the world. I mean, people are reading Shakespeare or the Icelandic sagas and all these great pieces of literature, and then they get essays about how many people died in that battle, or what was the name of this person's grandmother. Whereas, I mean, this literature was written to exemplify certain values and rituals like brotherhood, like friendship and so on. And the purpose of the teaching of literature should be to help students get acquainted with and drawn towards these ideals, and to discuss them then critically, and to see them as something which is bigger than just sort of, getting and spending. It's kind of getting and spending philosophy. So definitely, I think there's a lot that individual teachers can do. They don't really have to wait for OECD to change its educational policy. And who knows when that's going to happen. I mean, there's a lot that individual teachers and individual classrooms can do.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, thank you. The last comment is from Professor Hung.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian. Thank you for your great work. Well, I have some maybe questions or comments. First of all, I also agree with Geir about re-enchantment. I think I find these concepts fascinating. But also you mentioned anti-individualism. Don't you think anti-individualism a little bit too strong? I would like to hear you speak more about that. And also you mentioned the concept of flourishing. Well, for me, this concept is not very clear. Are you talking about the individual flourishing or the collective flourishing? Would you like to say more about that? And also, at the end, in your conclusion, you talked about 3 possible outcomes regarding consensus on prosperity. So, are you talking about these 3 possible outcomes coexist in different societies simultaneously, or what? So that's my question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so just to start with the last question, when I was writing down these 3 options, I was sort of more thinking in terms of what is going to come out eventually out of this work with OECD. I mean, is OECD really going to be able to come up with some kind of a definition of specification of flourishing, and is it going to be able to operationalize it and measure it in PISA tests in the future? I mean, that's their hope. I mean, they are very practically minded. I mean, they're not only interested in the philosophy. They have asked people at Harvard to try to come up with some kind of measurements so you can compare educational systems in terms of the flourishing of students. So I was just thinking, what could come out of this? I mean, maybe optimistically, yes, we will come up with some consensual view, or maybe we will come up with a view that some countries adopt, but not others, or maybe we will just stay where we are at the moment, where each country has its own, in a way, definition of what the aims of its educational system are. So I was thinking about this more sort of internationally. Yeah, I mean, anti-individualism is maybe a too strong a term. I'm more thinking about sort of mitigating Western individualism with a greater focus on relationality, as Geir and Jin Li were talking about. So I don't see these as sort of complete opposites, black and white. I mean, most people are somewhere on the scale between being individualistic and collectivist. The definition of flourishing obviously is controversial. So the Aristotelian definition is basically the fulfillment of your overall human potential as a rational, moral, political, and emotional being. So it's a very broad definition. But then, obviously, we need to, if we want to operationalize it, we have to operationalize it in terms of certain subcomponents that can be measured, like health and happiness and meaning in life and relations and friendships and so on. So that's what OECD is hoping to do. I mean, like I said, they're not only interested in a philosophical consensus, they're also interested in how in future PISA tests, in addition to measuring numeracy and literacy, there will also be some measures of different flourishing levels in different countries. Is that too optimistic? Is that realistic or not? Well, only time will tell.
Okay. Thank you so much for your talk, Professor Christian. So our last talk is from Professor Ruyu Hung. Professor Ruyu Hung is a distinguished professor of philosophy of education at National Chiayi University, Taiwan. Her academic specialties lie in the fields of eco-pedagogy, philosophy of education, educational aesthetics, and ethics, with particular emphasis on deconstruction, phenomenology, ecological philosophy, and comparative studies between Eastern and Western educational philosophies. She was elected a Fellow of the Philosophy of Education Society of Australian in 2022. Professor Hung has extensively published in both Chinese and English in peer-reviewed journals and books. Her book, Education Between Speech and Writing, Crossing the Boundary of Thought and Deconstruction, received the 2019 Book Award from PESA and from the Coalition of Educational Academic Societies in Taiwan. Her notable edited publication is Nature, Art, and Education in East Asia, Philosophical Connection by Routledge. So welcome, Professor Hung.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to join this roundtable. So I will share some of my ideas about Chinese way of learning. Well, did you see my slides? You see? Okay. All right. Here are some ridiculous photos, but why do I use them? They don't study from my international study experience. When I studied abroad years ago, I suddenly realized how important the written word are, because in Taiwan, when I was in Taiwan, it was all natural for us to watch TV programs with subtitles. But when I watched TV programs in other countries, I found there was no subtitle. And then I just tried to check online if there are subtitles used in other Chinese-speaking societies. I realized that there seems to be a tendency that the Chinese-speaking societies all emphasize the written words. So that starts my interest in seeking the tendency in Chinese-speaking society. Okay, so we can find a lot of written words or printed words in educational settings, in all kinds of educational settings or in public. And then I found maybe, are we descendants of Chinese culture living in a wordaholic society? Wherever we go, the written words are always there. At many scenic spots in China are calligraphy inscriptions left by past historical celebrities. So a scholar Yan says, Chinese landscape is never complete without some calligraphy inscription, but the natural, artificial, traditional Chinese landscape is covered with calligraphy inscriptions. Inscription can be found on rocks or cliffs at viewpoints, monuments, or temples in modern times in Confucian heritage cultures. Landscapes of interest can be observed to be covered with words, whether they're handwritten or printed. And sometimes the words are scenery inscriptions, sometimes they're graffiti. The obsession of words can be seen as a cultural syndrome that haunts Chinese heritage cultures, or now I will say Chinese-speaking societies. The most prominent symptom could be the veneration of written words or the belief in the charms of words, which is skillfully used by political leaders. In empirical China, emperor's order is conveyed by steles with inscriptions. In contemporary Chinese-speaking societies, political leaders like to write calligraphy in public, or their writings are given at particular occasions. In writing, or the written word can be taken as a clue. The idiosyncrasy of Chinese characters inspires the exploration, because Chinese character could be the most difficult language to write among all languages. Unlike most languages in the world, Chinese is monosyllabic, and writing is logographic, and some characters are ideographic. Does the unique Chinese writing system contribute to the formation of characteristics of Chinese culture and worldview? What is the relationship between Chinese writing and philosophy? I take a rarely noticed position to examine educational ideas and practice, which is graphocentrism. By graphocentrism, I mean the view prioritizing writing over speech. Its opposite view is phonocentrism, which gives primacy to speech over writing. In my view, the difference of order of priority may allude to the cultural difference between the West and the East. Western languages are phonetic and inevitably embedded with phonocentrism. Speech seems to be inseparable from thought, logos, whereas writing does not appear so. One can speak before one can write. Phonocentrism, in turn, is considered as conspiring with logocentrism and ethnocentrism. According to Derrida, the trio of logo-phono-ethnocentrism is the origin of discrimination, oppression, exclusion, the practices of which can be observed from the past history. So we can think education through the spoken and the written word, take them as the lens. So phonocentrism, the belief that sounds and speech are superior to or more primary than written language. Graphocentrism means the view that written words have primacy over spoken words. Phonocentrism, so at one time when I read Derrida's of grammatology, when he mentions about phonocentrism and take it as the Western metaphysics, it was striking for me to think about, to think on the opposite way, to think about the Chinese way of learning. And phonocentrism, the privilege of the phone does not depend on the choice. I'm sorry, I have to take it away. That could have been avoided. It responds to the moment of economy, let us say of the life or history, or of being as self-relationship, the system of hearing, understanding oneself speak, through the phonic substance, which presents itself as the non-exterior, non-wordly, therefore non-empirical or non-contingent signifier, had to dominate the history of the world during the entire epoch, has even produced the idea of the world, the idea of the origin of the world in terms of the difference between the wordly and the non-wordly, the outside and the inside, ideality and non-ideality, universal and non-universal, transcendental and empirical, etc. So this is the trio of the Western tradition of metaphysics according to Derrida. This suggests the possibility that non-phonetic cultures hold the potential of resistance against the metaphysics of oppressive trio, since non-phonetic cultures may not be limited within the confinement of phonocentrism. Chinese culture is thus a key to liberation. Yet Chinese culture founded on graphocentrism is not without ethnocentric or logocentric oppression. Power in China does not speak, but writes. Thus, it is plausible to suggest that concerning power and domination, the relationship between the Western phonocentrism and the Eastern graphocentrism could be more complicated and thereby needs further examination. The power of writing in Chinese-speaking societies was effectively in many aspects of everyday life. Why are written words intertwined in the tradition, history, religion, culture, and daily life in such depth and sophistication? The wonder of words drives me to investigate the underpinning ideology and philosophy. So we can see a lot of clues from the ancient texts, like in the Huainanzi, the invention of the writing that is amazing and that is a wonder. So according to Huainanzi, in ancient times, when Cangjie inventing writing, heaven rained down millets and ghosts wailed at night. So how amazing it is. And this is Cangjie, so who has 4 eyes, which means he has more good vision than normal people. And Cangjie, upon observing the patterns to the tracks of birds invented written documents, whereupon deceit and artifice sprouted forth. Once deceit and artifice sprouted forth, people ignored the basics and busied themselves with the peripheral. They gave up the occupation of farming and turned their attention instead to the gains from awl and blade. Heaven knew of their impending hunger, and so made it rain millet for them. Okay, so that is a repeat what we have read before. Okay, and how Changzhe inventing wood, he observed the footprints of birds and animals. So the Chinese writing is modeled from nature. But we can also find some clues from classics, especially in the Analects, how the written words matter. According to, and so written word is more important than the speech. And also we can find this is the inclination in modern Confucian way of learning. The master said, the superior man wishes to be slow in his speech and earnest in his conduct. And also this is another paragraph from Analect. Sima Niu asked about perfect virtue, and he also said one should be cautious and slow in speaking. Okay, and this is the most prominent saying from the Analect. The master said, 5 words and an insinuating appearance are seldom associated with true virtue. Okay, and this is a similar view for showing the importance of writing and belittle speech. I won't read the passages because of the limit of time. But I would want to say that since speech is belittled and the writing is emphasized in Chinese culture, so it becomes an ideology. And from the classics, we can see some other descriptions about the importance of writing. For example, in the 说文解字, the overall written language, 文字 or word, is the foundation of classics and arts and the initiation of sovereignty of kingdom. And it is what the former generations relied on to transmit culture to later ages. Men of later times were relied on it to understand antiquity. Therefore, it is said, the upholding of the foundation generations, the foremost principle. So the written words, the words gives power or the legitimacy to the power, to the sovereignty, to the king. Okay, so this brings me to education, and I will skip some part about some discussion from the history of education. What draws my attention to education, especially, is the goal of education. That is the self-cultivation or the cultivation of the self. But what kind of the subject that we should cultivate in education? In Confucianism, we always say that 君子 may be the idea. So I would like to think from the other perspective, what does 君子 mean concerning graphocentrism? Maybe we are trying to cultivate a 君子 as a writing subject. But it doesn't, I have some criticism about the writing subjects, but I don't mean it is entirely problematic. There is something good for us. So I will take this word. This is not a Chinese character. It is a Japanese character. It is pronounced shisuke. I think most of you understand Chinese character, and you can see what it means. It means the beauty or of the body, beauty, right? But in Japanese, it means literacy or the cultivation. So I would like to think about, I think all in the Roundtable, the common thing is the cultivation of the self. But in Chinese tradition, the cultivation of the self, we call it 修身. So it can be translated as the cultivation of the body. But how can we cultivate the body to cultivate the self? I think one of the Chinese way is really intriguing and artistic, which is calligraphy. So writing calligraphy is a way of cultivating the self. Mentally, you can cultivate the mind as well as the body. So I would like to say that a few words about Chinese calligraphy. Chinese calligraphy is a spatial somatic activity because it uses a brush to write. And that's why it trends a lot. In the process of writing, the body sense enables of the calligrapher's personality on the work. The acquisition of supreme calligraphy skills is a process of cultivating the body. So I think in some sense, body and mind and the cultivation of education, they are all connected. That's what I share today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Hung. So the first comment is from Professor Li.
Yeah, this is a very fascinating study. And Ruyu's research is always interesting because she writes about the things that mainstream comparative philosophers, like psychologists, don't pay attention to. But I think this is fascinating that she has uncovered these deep roots in terms of Asian Confucian or Chinese emphasis on the written word. Now, it has been said that the Chinese themselves always cite the saying that 上下五千年, that means up and down. We've been up and down 5,000 years on this planet. In other words, we've had a long history, unbroken long history. Unlike these other ancient civilizations, Babylon, nowhere in sight, only in the rubbles. And the ancient Egyptian society, culture is not, the place is not inhabited by the same kind of cultural people. And India, again, it's it's a combination of many hundreds, more than 100 religions and ethnic groups and so on. Only the Chinese remains the same. And many scholars have actually in Taiwan as well across the world, China and so on, have attributed that very longevity of the civilization to this very idea that the Chinese culture values the written word. And now China has been building, economy, digging the ground, and more excavations, archaeological discoveries are made, right? And what excites the Chinese most is not the gold vessel, bronze. Yes, those are great. Okay. But the bamboo strips that have words on them. The whole world and the Chinese and East Asian, I would say, very excited when we discover anything buried in the tomb with written words, because that would help us understand history, the particular context and time and so on. I think, Ruyu, you're right about the extreme importance of that, because that holds history together. So now back to your wonderful analysis. I would like to know about this Confucian self-cultivation. Okay, so you cited Confucius saying, 君子乐于言而敏于行, right? So the exemplary person or superior man is slow in speech, but eager in doing, in conduct. Act. So what do you think is the relationship between the written word, right? The writing subject, okay, and his or her their act, right? As 敏于行. Okay. So perhaps you can elaborate, because in the interest of time, I won't ask other questions, but I like to read your work. Very, very wonderful. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. And this is a good question. I think only from that paragraph of Confucius doesn't simplify it or help me to reach the view of graphocentrism. But I try to find the clues from the underlags that build graphocentrism. So not only that. That sentence that Confucius said talked about slowing words, but also there are a lot of descriptions about slogan words, or words are not so important, but acts are more important. But apart from Confucius, there are other scholars in the old time, the literates in the whole 2,000 years, they try to legitimize the importance of written words. So the documentation or the printed words, the substantial things, reification in some sense, becomes more important. Maybe that is not the only one views that I would try to catch the characteristics of Chinese culture, but that is, I hoped, a particular view to understand the specialty of Chinese culture. But that could help us to widen our understanding and also try to compare it with the Western culture. And maybe I would like to get the intercultural critique. I hope that phonocentrism and graphocentrism maybe provide views to criticize and complement each other. So in that sense, Chinese culture and Eastern culture and Western culture, can contribute something to each other.
If I may just, just make a quick link. So we know Sima Qian, the Chinese first comprehensive historian, Sima Qian, and he literally chose to be castrated between death and castration. That was his sentence. He did something, whatever the emperor thought was wrong, okay? Wanted to kill him. But you have the choice of paying lots of money to buy your life, okay? Or you have to be castrated, okay? He chose castration. Of course, in the past, many people died because the hygiene, whatever, okay? And he survived. The only reason in his letter to the Bao Renan Shu, right, and said, the reason I chose that was the hope that I could write history down. And that's the destination of my life. And as his father told him, okay? So sure enough, he wrote one of the monumental volumes, right, of ancient and up to the Han Dynasty to his time. So I just want to draw that connection to people. Writing is life and death to a lot of Chinese people. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Li. The next comment is from Professor Sigurðsson.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This was fascinating. I loved it. So it's so rich and so many different aspects that we could talk about. I just want to make maybe just a couple of comments and then one question very, very quickly. One is, of course, that we also have the depreciation of, sort of glib speech. We also have that in early Western philosophy. I mean, Plato, of course, when he talks about rhetoric, that he absolutely despises, this sort of empty talk that is aimed at producing one result and influencing people's behavior. And he, of course, distinguishes that from real philosophy, which is dealing with truth. Unfortunately, I think rhetoric is much more common in our societies than philosophy, especially in the political sphere. So I think that's one thing to consider, that we also have similarities there, that we have in Confucius, in a way. Now, as for calligraphy, man, I mean, if there is any aspect of Chinese culture that is difficult for outsiders to access, that's really calligraphy, And I'm thinking about the sinologist Simon Leys, who was a Belgian-Australian sinologist. He talks about it as one more art. I mean, meaning that this is an art that doesn't exist in the West. I mean, we call it calligraphy, but it's not really a very good name for what Shufa is. Calligraphy means just written, some kind of, nice looking letters or something like that, but that's not really what it is. It's much more than that. And of course, it has always been, like you also mentioned, it has always been associated with cultivation. I mean, both the practice of Shufa is a kind of self-cultivation, and of course also the product, the calligraphy itself is also indicative of somebody's sophistication, or so it has been thought of. And I think it can really be related with Li as well, because it's a kind of a ritual, it's a kind of a dance, and especially when you look at the Cao Shu, the cursive script, I mean, and you follow it, you are actually practicing Li, you are making movement, and it's very aesthetic and very beautiful, and it's a form that is important and meaningful. Now, so my question is, in today's world, where also Chinese speakers and writers may not be writing so much by hand anymore. They are writing more on tablets or phones or computers. And I've also heard that, young people sometimes even forget how to write characters, because they don't practice enough. How applicable, or how can we make the rich world of calligraphy relevant to that world? And maybe the other side question is, how can it be somehow contribute to education in a more universalistic sense of the word? These are huge questions, but I don't expect you to answer them fully, but some indication of what I would be interested in maybe exploring in more detail. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is a really important question, although I don't have the standard answer. But I do think that writing Chinese calligraphy, yeah, you're right. But I don't know how I can, call it 书法, right? It's really that kind of discipline. It's not only the training, it's a discipline of the mind and the body. But yeah, nowadays in the technology times, young people are more and more unfamiliar about, those ancient skills and techniques and art. Yeah, so I think that is an important issue for educators to think at how to raise their awareness about that. And also, I think this is interesting because in Chinese we call it 书法, but maybe I would prefer the Japanese way. They call it 书道. Yeah, so they use dao. Yes, yeah. So sometimes I think really intercultural study can give us more inspirations. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So the last comment is from Professor Kristján Kristjánsson.
Yeah, thank you. Very fascinating again. I have to say though that I've always been very skeptical of this equation by Derrida between phonocentrism and Western culture in general. I think it is a feature of a certain historical epoch in Western culture, starting with the Enlightenment and Protestantism. But if you go further back, and I mean, Geir hinted at this earlier, you find something completely different. I mean, if you look at the description of the Aristotelian megalopsykos, who is maybe most similar to the Confucian Yunzi, then Aristotle says that the megalopsykos walks very slowly, speaks very slowly and few words, but he's eager to act. If you look at the ruins in Greece or Rome, I mean, the Oracle of Delphi had all these graphic inscriptions. I mean, know thyself. If you go to Pompeii, you see all these, graphic inscriptions as well, and symbolism. And obviously the Catholic Church, I mean, that was what the Catholic Church was all about. It was about inscriptions and visual images. And if you read Comenius and the medieval moral educators, I mean, they think that the best way to teach virtues is by exposing children to visual arts and sculpture rather than music or philosophy or literature. And then something changed. I mean, obviously we know that Protestantism is much more ascetic, much more austere than Catholicism. I mean, that ornaments and inscriptions disappeared from churches and they became very mundane, etc. So I just think that actually, like Geir was suggesting earlier, I think actually there's a much greater similarity between ancient and even medieval Western culture and Chinese, and this phonocentrism comes much later than Derrida suggested.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I totally agree with you. When I try to use this lens to see the difference between the West and the East, but also, as you said, I found there is similarities in between. And it seems that it all depends how and what we select from the past. So somehow that run the risk of reductionism. Yeah, I think I must be very careful about how I use these terms. Yeah, and also I would like to, if I had the opportunity to talk more about the communication when I use these terms between the East and the West, and how the so-called graphocentrism in the East and the phonocentrism in the West, how can these two views help each other to broaden our view of education? Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you thank you very much for Professor Li, Professor Sigurðsson, Professor Kristjánsson, and Professor Hung for your wonderful talks today. And I think this is the end of our this series roundtable. And I would also like to thank for every audience listen to our talks, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take good care.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, no,
Thank
thanks
you,
everyone. That was
Yeah.
wonderful.
This is
Thank you,
really
Paul.
excellent. Very, very, very enriching and very wonderful. I look forward to reading all of your work and then gain a better understanding of your perspectives. It's wonderful. This is great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Thank